Good morning, Peter Rosey here, and this is the second formal podcast of the Legacy of Expo 88 YouTube, and it is my absolute pleasure this morning to be interviewing for this podcast Noel Robinson from Noel Robinson Architects, who is quite a legendary businessman and architect in Queensland. And I thought I'd start this podcast off that you had extensive experience in relation to the British Pavilion. And I was wondering if you met Maggie Thatcher.
No, I didn't.
Oh, God.
But having worked with all those guys, they were developing technology which was called the HODL, about having a 2-hour trip from Brisbane to London, and the HODL was going to go up, the Earth goes round, and the HODL comes down. So, there was a lot of interesting things happening in the world. Every day there is, of course, but at that stage that was a pretty interesting concept. It's never happened, and I think that those sort of things people talk about, and it cross-fertilises, it gives you creativity, so much so that at the moment I have been involved in assisting WISC, it's like the Jetsons, come into Brisbane for the Olympic Games. We're able to convince the Council of Mayors in this area to set up a video conference with them in San Francisco last September. One of my partners, who actually he has been the Trade Commissioner for New Zealand from Brisbane, came across WISC in one of his travels because they were developing a product which was it's urban air mobility. So basically they're air taxis. They're like Ubers of the sky, but they're electric. So there's this new technology coming out of that actually Boeing have now bought into, but they're going to come to Brisbane. The first flights will be by 28, and they'll be here for the Olympic Games in 2032.
Based out at the Brisbane airport, I gather?
No, they're like individual little flying aircraft, electric ones, and they do vertical takeoff and landing. So they're not sort of like a helicopter. They don't need glide paths.
Okay.
But they will go to the airport. I mean, there'll be over 200 stations around Brisbane. So you'll see these little things flying around the sky. But I just referring to that really as things get talked about at expos that actually materialise. And talking about the British Pavilion, that was one that I particularly was really interested in because I thought, what a great idea. And I see they're still talking about it. There was some article the other day on TV about it. And I don't know the science of all that, but it sounds feasible. And I just see this morning that Branson's intergalactic, whatever it's called, aeroplane did its first commercial flight up into space today. So we're advancing quite swiftly in technology. I think that we're not quite advanced that in buildings at the moment. We're still building buildings that are old technology, but we are moving very swiftly into sustainability in our buildings and the way that we actually put them together for our climate, so that they're climatically responsive. And as I said before about Expo, it was a climatically responsive response to that site. To have an indoor-outdoor space where people enjoyed the weather, the fabulous weather we have here in Brisbane. And I mean, this winter so far, I mean, even though it was very cold this morning, the days are just incredible. Sunny days, no rain, beautiful temperatures, 20 degrees, and it makes you feel so good, the climate here in Brisbane. This latitude has got about 1/6 of the world's population living in it, and I think that if you design everything correctly, you don't need air conditioning. Air conditioning is actually very bad for the environment. So we're trying to build as many buildings as we can to have natural cross-ventilation and to make sure that they're not using massive amount of energy. And if we are using energy, it's got to be regenerative. Sustainability is still a major target, but the new way now today is regenerative design, and the circular economy. So everything goes round and round, if you can make it do that. So I think that we've come a long way from Expo 88, but the point I was really trying to say is that ideas come up out of Expos, and when you meet all the different countries. And the thing about the British Pavilion is they always had a show on every day. They had the dancer girls out the front and all that sort of stuff. It was quite a spectacle. And Expo 88's a major piece of entertainment. The night walk with the lights and the dancing, the bands.
Qantas Parade.
The Qantas Parade.
Which must be very close to your heart, given your recent major
museum.
Yeah, museum development out at Longreach.
Exactly. Right. So, yes, that's that. The last museum part of that was the air park, which is the big shaded roof over the major pieces of aircraft out there, 747, 707, Connie, and that sort of thing. So, DC3, you've been there, good. Like they're all intertwined, these sorts of pieces of public architecture, and knowing how to do inside outside is really important, instead of just putting everything in a box and putting air conditioning in it. That's not the way to do things, because you don't experience the outside. I mean, I'm very lucky in this building here. I've got a fabulous view of the river along the front, and I do experience the outside as well as being inside, but it's not the same as being inside outside. There's still air conditioning and all those sorts of things. So we're learning about how to live a better life, and I think Expo subliminally, and also the people you've met, just develops that process, I suppose.
There's actually quite an interesting world first that was at Expo 88.
Mm-hmm.
So the epiphyte forest was the world's first green wall type technology, and Laurie Smith.
Yes, Laurie.
When he told me that story, and I'm thinking to myself, this is quite amazing that was a world first and it's not been trumpeted. And I find it even more surprising that the Brisbane City Council or the state government at Roma Street haven't replicated that quite amazing piece of infrastructure. It's quite a shame.
Thank you for reminding me of that. And you're absolutely right. We need to take that up and see if we can replicate it. Laurie Smith's a great landscape architect, and he was intricately involved in the master planning of the project, and he had some great ideas. He was acknowledged at the time as being, he's a very nice, quiet man, Laurie.
Too quiet for his own good.
Yes, probably. But he did some fabulous work, and it's a shame that he hasn't been able to take that technology and develop it.
So, considering we're rewilding Victoria Park, it would be nice to see a little bit of that flavour, because it did manage, as Laurie said, to bring a true rainforest experience into a subtropical climate where it wouldn't have existed otherwise.
True. Yeah, no, that was a great outcome.
It was. Now, just while I've having a bit of a win with good eye suggestions, the self-supporting technology that I'm assuming was part and parcel of the Young at Heart Pavilion, Kurilpa Bridge, that actually uses the same sort of
very similar
technology.
Yes, it's a tense segregity structure. I call it fiddlesticks, but it's
still the world's only one, I understand.
Yeah, I believe so. And I mean, when you look at it, you think, gee, how does that work? Because it looks very flimsy, but it's actually a very strong piece of structure.
30% stronger with 50% less materials.
Right. Yeah, no, well, I mean, Arabs were involved in the design of that. We've worked with Arabs, and I developed a relationship with them, particularly out of the British Pavilion. We had a number of their people come out as well. But yeah, they're very good engineers, and So, yeah, that's right. I mean, you can do lots of things. You've got to experiment with structure. Structure is an integral part of architecture. I mean, Arup himself, Ove, said a structural engineer's got to be an architect's got to be a structural engineer. And I think it is really, you can't build anything without understanding structure. And the more you're adventurous with structure, then the more you can actually develop something that's unusual that you can take to the next level and experiment off. Young at heart, to some degree, was that. It was all done with suspension wires, mainframe structure, and cantilevering out these big, beautiful big sails that went out so that some of the structure was above it. So it looked very light, and that also helps people enjoy the outside where there's not a lot of columns and things in the way. So, yeah, that was it was an early part of responding to the climate.
And a lot of people probably won't have a good appreciation of exactly where this amazing structure was perched, because it was in a fantastic location to maximise the views that it obtained.
Yep.
Yet sort of disappeared into the background, and it has been on my agenda to do an interview with you for quite a number of years. And on the World Expo 88 Facebook page, it never gets a mention, and it should. So can you just, as if you're talking to someone who doesn't really know anything about where it was located,
Well,
I'll let you articulate it.
Yeah, it was located towards the front, and it did have a fabulous view, and it was about probably 2/3 the way along the frontage of Expo 88, and I think it'd probably be roughly located now where the swimming pool is, in that zone, because the British Pavilion was just off to the southeast of this particular pavilion. I could see it every time I was there, and you are right. The way the Young at Heart Pavilion was designed was, it actually took the language of what was being developed in terms of the steel, the elements of the panels and the fabric, and it actually, so you felt that you were in the outside, but you had shade and you had this fabulous view. And I think that its success was that it was an indoor-outdoor space rather than being an indoor space in an air-conditioned box. And at that time of the year, the climate was very pleasant. It wasn't overly hot and not overly cold. So I think that the appropriateness of that pavilion, like I love going to restaurants these days that have got indoor-outdoor. There's a number of them around Brisbane, and you feel a lot better instead of being inside something that's sort of too artificial. So it's nice to be out in this climate, and so that's what it did. It essentially was an indoor-outdoor space.
And it had a view of the river stage.
Yeah, and that's right.
That's because it was at
Correct.
the back of the seating arrangements for the river stage.
Yep.
So that's how it got its height, to get
Correct.
the view. Yeah.
Yep.
Which was what I was hoping you could articulate, but that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, today there's lots of fabulous restaurants over at South Bank. One that I particularly like is Otto's. It's right on the river, and it faces north. I mean, that aspect over there at South Bank is just sensational. And I'm pleased that the legacy always is that you end up with something that's quite fantastic. And that project was always designed as a legacy project. And today, and I think that's really important.
You mean South Bank was designed?
South Bank. Yeah, South Bank. Yep. So the thing about that is that we are very fortunate that that parcel of land is now open space, essentially, food and beverage. It's a bit like, it's not quite like the Tivoli in Denmark, but it's got that feel to it. You can walk around the place, and at night time it's got such a beautiful, the lighting's lovely, and yeah, it's a magnificent piece of open space. And
its legacy is fought over valiantly by Sally Ann Atkinson,
Yep.
Who I probably think history will show rightly that she was more the driving force of its current gestation. Now, while we're talking about South Bank, while it's not directly related to Expo 88, if my research has done me service, you had a great deal to do with the second stage, the rebirth regeneration after the first attempt. Is that correct? Or
to some degree, I won't claim total that, but I think that I've been involved in a number of workshops and committees and advocacy about the future of that.
And I think the advocacy part of it is important because
it is.
You look at Callaghan's role in South Bank, that was an advocacy role, and there was lots of fingers in the pie as it rolled forward, not least of which was obviously Jim Sawley.
That's right. Well, I chaired Callaghan's Brisbane 2000 committee, which is the design and the advocacy of what should be happening around the city, but South Bank was obviously part of that. And I think that, it was, when I was the partner in Bly, Jessup Robinson and Bly Robinson as it evolved, we got involved in the advocacy, and obviously Des Brooks, who was involved from DBI, he had a role, and he had some great ideas about how things should occur, and one was the canal right up the middle, and that didn't evolve, unfortunately, as a long-term thing. But if I'm not wrong, I believe that Des had the pool, was his idea.
Twice as big.
Yeah, twice as big. And look, I think that I wouldn't necessarily swim in it, but because I'm not a pool person, I'm an ocean person. I do a lot of swimming in the ocean, and I think the thing about having that there for the tourists and for families that can't get to a pool, it's a sensational asset, because you can swim there and look at the city, and you get faces north. There's nothing better in Brisbane and Queensland to have a north-facing beach, because that's where you get the sun, and providing you've got your sunscreen on and your hat. I think that the asset's a fabulous asset. So we have been left with a great asset of that open space, and there's still things you can do in there, and there's still things are going to happen over there to improve it over time. But it's one of the most beautiful walks along that river, having that essentially beautiful meandering walk along the edge. It's not a straight walk, it's got beautiful trees, it's got the arbour, it's got lots of stuff over there, and it is a great asset for the city.
And you'll be surprised to know that the World Expo 88 lights, which lit the boardwalk, the uplights, lasted until the 2011 flood, where they got so submerged that the waterproofing was eventually breached, and they were removed in 2012.
Right.
And some of them are up on display at the Caboolture Historical Village,
right,
where I had a small part to play in the saving of the Kendone sites.
Right. Well, the word Australia, Kendone, that ended up at the Shaftesbury Centre, and I did some work to help those people. But yeah, I'm not sure if it's still there actually. But
no, it was. I couldn't tell you the story without blowing my own trumpet.
Yep.
2013, myself and a fellow called John McGregor mounted a campaign to save them, because they ended up in a cow paddock.
Right.
And cows are a little bit indiscriminate, so they do tend to spray and leave a message behind, and that had caused a bit of
deterioration.
Rust, yes, and deterioration, let alone the colours fading. And by 2018, they were in a very sad state, but they were also in a proposed football stadium, because the college had grown and developed. The original Shaftesbury College experience as a rehabilitation centre for
Reverend Alan Mail.
Yeah, exactly. And he'd fallen out of favour, the use had changed, and the college had grown that had come in to replace it. Anyway, a fellow called Kurt Jones, young fellow, 14 at the time, put up a Facebook page for sale, $5,000.
Yeah.
And the ABC radio, Rebecca Livingston and Craig Zonka, phoned me up, and the last thing, I panicked, because they wanted them saved and brought to Brisbane. And I'm thinking, oh, Lord Mayor Graham Quirk's going to think I was behind this, he's going to kill me. And so I talked all about the deterioration and all the rest of it. But what did happen was that the Caboolture Historical Village, which had been looking at them without real purpose in mind, all of a sudden they were galvanised into saving them. And they did. And
well, that's good.
They were restored in 2018, and you won't believe it, they've just had their second restoration.
Oh, good.
Because they rushed the restoration. They used some self-adhesive things to get the colour in the mix. Now it's all done absolutely as per the original spec, so it's all painted and they're as new. They're just brilliant.
That's great. The thing about that Australia sign, these things have another legacy. Now, where Australia was over at South Bank, there's now a Brisbane sign. And
well, close to it. Yeah.
Well, close to it, yes. But the idea still lives on. And Brisbane over there is, lots of people use it and take their photographs up against it with the city background.
It is the most selfied Brisbane identity point of interest. And Graham Quirk, who led the charge to save that, was quite keen to follow the statistics on the clicks.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, things go around.
They do. Now, coming back to the South Bank experience and just mentioning Des Brooks, I think the canal idea, when it rebirthed itself into the Bougainvillea Walk, I think the essence of what he was trying to do was still achieved, but achieved in a way that really met his vision, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, the idea was to put a spine that you could actually experience all the landscape. His was to go through the water, which was terrific. But the walk through the Bougainvillea is the same walk, eventually. It's the essence of what was the creative thought behind that process. And if you're wanting to walk through the space and not be interfered with by too many other things, then it's a great way to go down there. And it's a great way just to go from restaurant to restaurant. And look, I mean, the restaurants over there, it's given a lot of restaurateurs an opportunity to deliver new food and product to the citizens of Brisbane. And it's been great for us to have the level of internationalism in those food and beverage offerings. At the moment, I think Little Stanley Street and stuff, that's sort of a bit too formal, but it still delivers exactly what the process is. The other restaurants that are a bit more informal through the space, in my view, work a little bit better. But even so, the legacy of the streetscape and the arbours, even the ones that run down the street, are all very successful, and they give a different scale to the urbanity of the CBD. So as the city evolves, we're getting lots of different lifting of the height restrictions. The height restrictions over the city here are to do and set by CASA. There's basically a glass ceiling over the city, which goes from the Story Bridge at 250 metres high, up to the south of the river here, and that is 274.3 metres high, say 275. But that glass ceiling is set by the flight paths from the airport, and I just finished a 90-storey building down here called Brisbane Sky Tower, and the airport are very protective of their height. They even sent drones up to make sure that we didn't exceed the height. But I think now the Brisbane City Council are looking at over at Kurilpa to do buildings of a similar height to sort of end up with another South Brisbane node. And it was always Robin Gibson's vision when he did the Cultural Centre, not to have high buildings over there. He wanted to see the mountains beyond the main cultural centre that was being developed, and that is a fabulous cultural centre that we now have as a legacy of him.
And in the first instance, this particular part of the interview, I just know that Noel would like to say a few words in relation to the memory of Sir Lou Edwards. Noel, over to you.
Yes, well, I met Sir Lou, of course, at Expo I had my own practice at that stage, and I'd been commissioned to do work at Expo 88 from the authority, which mainly was two projects I ended up there. One which I was commissioned directly by the authority, which was the Young at Heart Pavilion, which was a very interesting food pavilion that had beautiful big sails and a big open indoor-outdoor area that was very Queensland really, but it was very high-tech. At that stage I was still very keen about, and I still am, about advanced technology in steel architecture and putting things together sort of systematically. So I used that to develop that particular building, and I did meet Salu very early on, and at the end I've known him all the time since till when he passed. I used to see him all the time up at Noosa when he was up there before he passed. And I was part of his family. I know the people, his sons, and all those sorts of things, ultimately. So I did meet Salu very early, and then when Expo actually opened, I'd done these projects, which I also had designed I was involved with Fitch out of London doing the British Pavilion at Expo 88, and because of that, I also met a lot of people, of course, that were involved in the British side of things into the pavilion, and were involved then attending a lot of events around those sort of activities. And out of all that, I knew very well the architects that were designing Expo 88, because I was not designing the master planning or anything like that. But I obviously knew very well Graham Bligh, who was ultimately leading the master planning with Chris Clark, who I knew from London days. And I think that those people, together with Victor Ferris, the town planner, they were all sort of tied up together, and as a result I then merged my practice in 1988 with Bligh Jessup Bretnall, and it became known as Bligh Robinson. And so we went on to do a number of award-winning buildings, and it was a result of Expo 88 that I did that part of my business acumen in terms of moving into and developing a 120-person practice. The thing about Salu is that he was such a friendly person. He was a great diplomat. He was never ever saw any bad sides of him. He was always encouraging people to do stuff. He had just a really nice personality, and he's one of those people you couldn't help but to like and to work closely with. And I think that then he was well, he used to live out near me. I used to out at Hamilton Ascot, and used to see them walk the dogs, he and Jane, and the same thing up in Noosa. Used to always see them. So yeah, we weren't very close friends, but we were friendly, if you know what I mean. And he was a wonderful man, and as I say, he managed the process of Expo 88 incredibly well. There were no major issues there. Everything ran smoothly, and it's because of his personality, the way that he dealt with everything was almost casually, but it wasn't. Everybody felt at ease about the way they worked, and being able to come into the tail end of the production of the architectural exercise with Bligh Jessup Bretnall, I could see all that other work that had gone on, and they had a very close leadership in the way that whole project was master planned and delivered. And Chris Clark and Graham Bligh, they put together the sort of manufactured process, the sales, all those sort of things. Obviously, Jim McCormack was involved. I shouldn't forget Jim. So the thing is that it was basically a joint venture with Jim McCormack and Bligh Jessup Bretnall. And the key people really in there doing the work was Graham Bly and Chris Clark. And I think that, and there are other people from Jim's office as well, so I shouldn't forget that. And it was a truly collaborative process, Expo 88, in the design process. And I was just a sort of off to the side doing buildings. I wasn't involved in the day-to-day development of the master planning. That was all happening, and I was very enthusiastic about it because it was so good. The idea of having the shades, giving people cover as they walked around, and those sort of things. The process developed in a very, very logical and very climatic way for Brisbane. It was a very good climatic response to an open air event in terms of the architecture, and obviously all the productions, like things that Rick Bird was doing, with the street parades and all those sorts of things, the tension that was delivered, getting to the gate early, racing to the pavilions, all those sort of things were just really lovely things to be part of. And yeah, I've got a lot of fond memories of Salou, and which, as I say, have gone on for a lifelong period with him. And I occasionally still see his son David, and I think that he had a big influence on the way things happened. And
also on the development of Queensland as a result of
absolutely
the success of Expo.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he in government he had some very large portfolios that he was responsible for, and I think that it was a period of government I liked, and I think that it was a well managed period of government that I grew up during that period in, and I mean there was always initiative about development for Queensland, how it could be developed, and I think that they were a good team in there at that time.
Celio will
yes
will say yes, exactly right. I was instrumental in developing Queensland.
Well, exactly, and I've still got relationships with Miles Finger, who's Eric Finger's son. He's not at night, I don't think, but Eric. So, in fact, I just sent an email off to him in Dubai. So these things actually develop really long-term relationships, and I can think of a number of people that I've still. The network is still influenced in Brisbane. But one of the other things I think was interesting for me is when you gain experience in a particular type of project, you're able to use that and experience it into other projects. For argument's sake, I did design the Australian Pavilion in Expo in Daejeon in Korea. I did 5 projects in Expo in Seville. And again, a couple of those I worked with Fitch out of London, and I had a Spanish architect working in my office at the time. So we decided to go over and set up an office in Seville, and that office was there for about 3 years before and after Expo. And we had a lot of fun out of that. And I also was able to implement and educate other people around me to deliver and build the projects and project managing them. And we sort of developed a system of was like the fastest way to get people through and see the exhibit was actually to put them on a little escalator, not a little travelator, and so that they couldn't stop and hold up all the traffic. And John
walk backwards.
Yeah, or walk backwards. Yeah, John Callaghan and his partner Greville, they sort of developed that process, and we delivered that into a couple of expos as we went on. And I just can't remember which one, but I think one of the pavilions in Expo 88 had this travelator idea as well. And we found that moving people in that way, control them through the spaces where you want them to be was a great way. And of course, at the end, you always put them through a merchandising area that you'd sell Australian products. And, that was a really good way of helping the exporters sell and develop relationships with manufacturers or networks in the areas where the expos were on it. And so you sort of learn the process of how that evolves and the trade relationships that develop out those things. And that's where Salou was very good. He developed lots of trade relationships with the countries that came to Expo 88. And Expo 88 grew Brisbane from being a big country town to an even bigger Brisbane country town. So Brisbane's still a big country town, and it's got a really nice feel to it. It's getting a bit congested, but things will happen to fix that up. But I think that the whole process of expos are quite conglomerate. They spread, and they get people develop export knowledge and ability. And I in particular was very lucky that I was able to use my knowledge and experience that I gained out of Expo to do other projects. For argument's sake, with Fitch, I worked on the Saudi pavilion in somewhere else in the world. We did, and I've got. Oh, sorry, that was in Saudi pavilion was in Seville. I did. Sorry, that was one of the 5 projects I did in Seville, and I think that your relationships do foster themselves and grow, and you've just got to go and take those opportunities. If you don't take the opportunities, they don't ever turn up again.
Can I don't want to break your thought.
All right.
2 things. I just want to stop that, check that it's actually recording properly, just in case. Yep. And then we'll continue on. And I'll also do a quick little video out here while I'm at it. Just because I don't think you'd be very happy if I rung back and said, it didn't record properly.
No, that's all right.
All great plans sometimes don't quite go the way that you expect. And the interviews actually went on for a considerably longer period of time than what has been shown in this particular podcast. However, there was a slight technical glitch which remains unexplained. So I hope you've enjoyed this podcast, as it was certainly a great pleasure for me to record it.